I wanted to bring today's episode to the podcast talking about postpartum health. This is really the whole crux of what we do as to how to focus on your preconception health to then have a healthy mom and dad, and then healthy pregnancy, and then healthy postpartum period, healthy baby. And it really all goes together. We're going to give you the exact steps of what some themes that we see within either the postpartum period, what we're seeing as far as themes, and what you can do in the preconception period to really optimize a healthy postpartum period and healthy baby. So excited for you to listen to this episode, and thanks for being here. Hey there. Thanks so much for listening to the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast. And I've got a favor to ask you. If you are enjoying learning about the functional approach to fertility, consider going to iTunes and rating and reviewing the podcast. This is how it helps the show reach more people that are struggling with infertility, knowing that there's another approach that really can get to the bottom of why it's not working in the first place. So all you need to do is, if you're on the app or the desktop, just go in and consider leaving a 5-star rating and leave a review. And there is step-by-step instructions in the show notes showing you exactly how to do that. So if you can just take a few minutes, just take the few minutes right now. You can pause this recording, come back, leave the review. It would really mean the world to me and help others that are on the fertility journey as well. Take care. Hey there. I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 2 spots available per month to work with us. So the Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call is for action takers. And really people who are ready to move forward so they can finally have their baby. And if you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. So if you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, FABfertile.com, and click on book a free call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. That's FabFertile, FABfertile.com, and click on book a free call. One theme that keeps coming up with the couples in our FabFertile couples coaching program is sleep. Whether it's insomnia, having a hard time falling asleep, waking up at night, or feeling tired when we wake up, sleep is critical for fertility and hormones. And that's why I'm so excited to have Blue Blocks as our podcast sponsor. So we're exposed to blue and green light from our phones, our tablets, our computers, indoor lights, and more. And this exposure impacts our melatonin production. And melatonin is essential for both female and male fertility. It helps determine the frequency and duration of our cycle and impacts sperm. There's lots of blue light blocking glasses on the market, but the ones from Blue Blocks, they've actually compared other popular brands, and Blue Blocks block 100% of blue and green light, while other brands fall short. So I have their sleep glasses. They have red lenses, and the ones I have are a little translucent frame, and they're so stylish and really cool. And so they eliminate 100% of the blue and green light in the 400 nanometer to 550 nanometer range. So this is exact range that has been shown in clinical studies to disrupt melatonin and negatively impact your sleep. So all you do is wear your sleep glasses after sunset until it's time for bed, and you'll notice improved sleep after just one use. And it's also cool to use when you're flying for managing jet lag. So I got to say I was a little skeptical about the noticing improvement after one use, but literally I use these glasses and my sleep is actually already pretty good. I used them for one day, and I have to say after one day, I had the best sleep of my life. I just felt so rested. So these glasses, they ship free and they're tracked for all orders anywhere in the world. And also they have all their frames come in prescription, non-prescription, and reading glasses. Plus you can send in your frames and they'll add the blue light blocking and green light blocking lenses to your frame. So this is an easy hack that you can add to your fertility toolkit. All you do is go to BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com. Use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast at checkout and receive a 15% discount. That's BlueBlocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast to receive your 15% discount. I didn't need to go to donor eggs. Obviously, I don't regret it. I have beautiful children. I could have done things differently, restored. I was still cycling back in my 20s. I could have looked at my health, the environmental toxins, the stress I was under.
Many women are being told their eggs are too old. That's often merely an assumption that's not based on actual evidence. The reason being that there is no direct test of egg quality. You can't test egg quality.
It's the man who's got a food sensitivity or he has a zinc deficiency.
Like there can be a root cause to these symptoms that are, quote unquote, period problems, that the doctor will pass you a pill without any question of why.
And some part of you knows that if you can reframe your journey from not want to struggle, or if it is struggle, learn how to embrace the struggle. Learn how to embrace it.
Most conditions in the child occur during the 9 months of development. It's the genetic switches are turned on or turned off, and they're pre-programmed. So you are in such a powerful, amazing position to do amazing things for your kids.
You know, why is IVF the first step? Because we believe it should be the last step. Welcome to Get Pregnant Naturally, where functional medicine and natural fertility solutions will help you get pregnant and have your baby. Hey there, I'm Sarah Clark, founder of Fab Fertile and your host. I believe the functional approach is the first step for anyone struggling with infertility, and my aim is to help you get pregnant naturally. Today, I'm welcoming Brandy Buskow back to the podcast, and we're digging into why it's important to focus and take at least 6 months on your preconception health to ensure a healthy postpartum period. So this episode is for you if you feel like you're running out of time and in a panic to conceive. You've tried everything and you're not sure it's not working, so IVF seems like your next logical step, and you don't know how to optimize postpartum health. So definitely check out episode number 6 for a functional medicine 101 talk, plus some of the tools we use to help couples conceive. And Brandy is part of my team here at Fab Fertile. She's an integral part of our couples coaching program, which uses functional lab testing, diet, and lifestyle changes to dramatically improve conception. So if you are struggling with infertility, your body is desperately trying to tell you something. Focusing on your health will either help you get pregnant naturally, or if you do need to go to the fertility clinic, it will improve your chances of success. Brandy is a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, board-certified functional wellness coach, master EFT practitioner, and she loves supporting women so they can learn how functional medicine addresses the underlying cause of disease or illness. So thanks so much for listening. I'm really so thankful that you are here. Make sure you hit subscribe, and if you know someone else who is on the fertility journey, please share this podcast with them. Hey, Brandy, excited to have you back on the podcast.
I'm excited to be back.
Awesome. So today we're talking about our favorite topic, and one that is especially important for you. This is one of your favorite topics too, postpartum health. Obviously, with our couples coaching program, the whole part of this is focusing on your preconception health to then have healthy parents. That's why we do couples coaching, healthy mom and dad, healthy pregnancy, and then healthy postpartum and healthy children. Because for myself, and Brandy can kind of share a little bit about her journey with this piece, but for myself, I was diagnosed with POI or POF at 28. Had both my kids with donor eggs, didn't focus on my preconception health. My postpartum health, I definitely had mood issues with, I don't know if I've heard postpartum rage. I don't know if it was that bad, but I was definitely irritable. And then also the health of my children with allergies and food sensitivities and mood issues going on. So, which can be linked back to what we're going to go into this, but C-sections versus vaginal birth, and then not really preparing your body for a baby. So today we're going to dig into the postpartum piece and why it's important. It's almost like, you take 2 steps back to take like one giant leap forward. And although most people that come to us, doesn't matter how old they are, everyone's in a panic to have their child, but it's those 2 steps back to take one giant leap forward that really looking at your health, the health of your postpartum health, and then the health of your children. So what's your take?
Yeah, I mean, this is huge. And like you said, my history is not that of fertility issues, but of postpartum issues. That's what drove me to seeking, at first working with a naturopath, and then realizing that wasn't exactly what I was looking for, and seeking more knowledge, and then becoming a functional practitioner, was the issues that I had postpartum, and realizing that many women have these issues, and there's almost a stigma or it's like a joke to talk about, recovery postpartum and how you're feeling. And unfortunately, the way that society is today, that adage of it takes a village to raise a child is very true. But in this day and age, we don't have that anymore. Our society is okay. Get back on your feet and recover and get back to work and push. And you should be able to do this like in a blink of an eye. You see celebrities, they're back at it in 2 months, and, you don't see the behind the scenes of all of the support that they have that we don't have normally. And so I think it's an important conversation to have, especially when you are trying so hard to become pregnant is to really be prepared for that postpartum period and have the tools in place to be able to pull from when there are going to be hard moments, because there are definitely going to be hard moments postpartum. That's just how life works.
Yeah, I know. I think the conversation's starting to shift a little bit. I know Katy Perry just posted, I saw a post with her with having 2 pumps on her breasts and this big, like really big granny underwear, and posted herself on Instagram there going, this is what, I think it was a couple of weeks post baby, looks like. It's not just like, oh, here I am back in my skinny jeans. So I think there's more people being real about this, but still a lot of people, like struggling in silence with it and not knowing what to do. So we wanted to kind of talk about, so first of all, the importance of postpartum health. And why is that an important consideration before you're trying to conceive?
Yeah, I mean, it goes along with the importance of preconception health, because if you are not healthy before you become pregnant, you're not magically going to become healthy while you are pregnant. Being pregnant and giving birth is a very big stress on the body. It's like a marathon. It takes time to recover. Postpartum, you are going to be sleep deprived. Your hormones are going to be all over the place. You are going to feel overwhelmed. You have this new baby. There's lots of things to do. And so you want to make sure that you are resilient and that you can handle that and handle the lack of sleep, which for some mothers can be a couple months to a year. I mean, there's moms who have kids who still don't sleep through the night at a year old. And so you need to have your body in a place where it's prepared for that. The other thing that's important about the preconception health that you kind of mentioned, Sarah, is, thinking about how that is affecting your children postpartum. For me, that is a very big thing, not only for my own health, but I have seen that with some of my kids. So I had twins first, and then almost exactly a year to the day when I had my twins, I got pregnant again with my third child. And I know for sure having twins was a very big toll on my body, and I was not nutrient sufficient. I was very nutrient depleted. And so I was already behind the ball on that pregnancy with my daughter. And so when I did have her, we had to deal with food sensitivities with her very early on that many of the doctors couldn't figure out. She had a rash all over her body, and the doctors didn't know what was wrong with her. They gave me medications and creams. And when I finally said to them, well, is it food? Oh, well, maybe take it out and then she'll grow out of it. Well, she never grew out of it. And I truly do believe that it was because of the fact that I wasn't nutrient sufficient from having the twins. So that did affect her postpartum. And I did have her via C-section. It was an emergency C-section. And so she already had a start to life with a lower microbiome than she would have if she had been born vaginally. It's important to think of all these things. And it's not to make anybody feel bad for having a C-section or for not getting healthy. I mean, there's plenty of examples of women who weren't 100% healthy and had super healthy kids and did great. But it's also something that I think is important for us to consider while we're going on this fertility and preconception journey.
Yeah, because the temptation is to kind of push it, because pushing it with medication and IUIs and IVF, pushing it forward, which obviously, I did that with donor eggs. But like you, both my kids have got they're otherwise somewhat healthy, but they're definitely when they were, and I'll talk about this a little bit more towards the end there when we go into it, but some health issues that could have been avoided, really. Okay, so for epigenetics, which is basically, diet and lifestyle so your genes will either be turned on or off by diet and lifestyle. So even though you have a history of diabetes in your family, cancer, heart disease, thyroid issues, whatever it is, it doesn't mean that you're predisposed to get those. Diet and lifestyle can turn it on or off. And we all have that kind of tipping point if we've pushed ourselves too far if we've got an underlying food sensitivity, gut infection, chronic stress, push. And then next thing you know, some of these issues start to hit. And then even the fact of infertility being passed on to the next generation. Yeah. What's your take on epigenetics?
I mean, epigenetics is huge. And some of you may have heard this thing, I think Dr. Jolene Brighton and some other very big names in fertility and women's health have really said that the health of your grandmother will affect the health of your child. So what she did pre-pregnancy and while she was pregnant with your mother, and what your mother did when she was pregnant with you, and what you do, it all has a trickle down effect. And that is what we call epigenetics. Of course, we can't control all of that. You cannot control what your grandmother was doing or what she was exposed to. You can't control what your mother was doing. But what you can control is how you are living your life. And that's why, when we are working with couples, one of the biggest things that we do work on is environmental exposures and the foods that you're eating. Are you limiting the amount of chemicals that you're bringing in or ingesting? Because that's going to have a very big impact on you, and it's going to have a very big impact on your children. And that's true for men and women, not just for women. It's very, very important because the health of the sperm is affected by that as well. That's where you can only control what you can control. And so by being aware of that and preparing your body, I would say at least 3 months before you're ready to try to become pregnant, really look at your lifestyle. Make sure you're sleeping, look at your stress, make sure you have good communication, look at what you're eating, look at the chemicals. Those can have a very big impact, not only on chances of becoming pregnant, but how healthy your pregnancy is and the health of your child afterwards.
Yeah, I like the analogy. I heard it from Dr. Ben Lynch, who I've interviewed on the podcast. Definitely check that episode out with him, talking about MTHFR and methylation. Importance of, well, first of all, making sure you're having a methylated prenatal. But why do we spend 12 to 18 months planning for our wedding, and then month 1 we want to get pregnant? Whereas why don't we switch that around? 12 to 18 months preparing our body for our baby and, elope.
Yeah, for sure. And you hear this also from the Weston A. Price Foundation. And this also comes into child spacing, which again might be a little bit of a controversial issue. And I can attest to this fact that we did not do well with that with our kids. But, once you've had a baby, your body, it takes a toll. A lot of nutrients are being used for the pregnancy and for the growth of the baby, and you need time to replenish those, especially if you're breastfeeding and you're not sleeping. To jump right in and try to have another baby a year later may not be the best idea. And so really thinking about that and spacing your children out enough so that you've had the time to fully recover emotionally and physically. You have all the nutrients on board for a second, a healthy second or third baby, depending on where you are. So that still rings true whether this is your first time getting pregnant or you're thinking about having another baby. It's very, very important to really think about how nutrient sufficient you are and what your lifestyle looks like, because that is going to impact your pregnancy and postpartum and your baby.
Yeah. And just a bit about, children. So 46% of children have chronic disease before reaching adulthood, which is like, when you think about that, insane, like what is going on. And it could be some of these things with the vaccination schedule. It'll be interesting to see what happened over COVID, because in some of those baby visits and things like that were delayed, and how that has impacted. I think there's some studies they were doing on with SIDS, with the fact of not having the baby visits with the vaccination, and how that's impacted lowered SIDS deaths. Overuse of antibiotics, which that was the case for my kids. For my daughter at like a year having ear infections. So both my kids were exposed to a lot of antibiotics. Like myself growing up, I hardly had any until then. I had my own lots of antibiotic use in my 30s after I had my children. And then C-section trends, with C-section use going up. I think 32% of births are now C-section. In China, 51% of births are now done by C-section. I think in Florida, the state of Florida, it's in the 40s percent. They're just doing more C-sections, which we were talking about. You're exposed to the hospital sterile setting as opposed to the microbiome of the vaginal microbiome. And toxicity. We've talked a lot about this podcast about with our foods that we're exposed to that have been sprayed with glyphosate, the genetically modified foods, the chemicals that were put on our body, the water that is tap water that's filled with all sorts of contaminants, over 300 contaminants, the EMFs, so the electromagnetic frequency that we're exposed to from our cell phones, and also the air that we're breathing. So a lot of toxicity around us.
Absolutely. I mean, and I remember hearing this quote from Katie Wells from Wellness Mama. And what really spurred her into being passionate about what she does is, after being pregnant with her first child, seeing the statistic that the children that we have today are expected to have a lower life expectancy than we have because of all of the rampant diseases in this world. We're seeing more incidents of children with things like type 2 diabetes, with autoimmune diseases, with skin issues. And there are so many different reasons for it. We can't just blame it on one thing. There are camps that are going to blame it all on vaccines and other camps that are going to blame it on other things. The reality is our world has changed. We are more disconnected than we were before. Our soils are depleted. They don't have the mineral content that they had before. The chemicals that we are spraying on our foods are definitely having an impact on our children. And the chemicals that we have been exposed to can also, like you said, Sarah, affect the epigenetics in the kids and predispose them to diseases that maybe they wouldn't have been predisposed to before. So I can definitely see, this ringing true because our society has changed so much. We're all on the internet, all being exposed to EMFs. There's very few sources of food that you can get at a grocery store that are truly clean and don't have some sort of degree of chemicals on it, whether it's from being sprayed in the fields or whether it's the containers that they're being packaged in. We just don't live the same life that our grandparents did, where they lived on the farm and they grew all their food there and they had the clean air and clean water. I mean, we just don't have that anymore. And so that's why it's even more important for us to really consider our lifestyle and what we're exposing ourselves to as much as possible, not to become neurotic about it, but as much as possible before getting pregnant, because we are seeing increases in these diseases with kids.
Yeah. And knowledge is power. It's not like paranoia. It's like, wait a minute, as you know better, you do better. And you just start to make those changes, slowly but steadily, and, not self-blame or, why didn't I know this? If you're listening to this podcast, now you know. So it's being able to, slowly start making those changes and start preparing your body for a baby and examine the piece of potentially conventional medicine telling you that you're too old and your eggs are old and, it's donor eggs perhaps for you, or like what you've been told of this panic that someone else, a well-meaning educated doctor, has instilled in you, and for you to re-examine that and to see, there's things that you can do. Another theme that we see also after pregnancy, and we've got an episode coming out, I think it'll air before this one, on secondary infertility, but talking about some autoimmune disease after pregnancy. And we will regularly see this with secondary infertility, not everyone, so to panic, but so if you have a genetic predisposition potentially to Hashimoto's or celiac or irritable bowel disease or rheumatoid arthritis, those are some of the more common ones that we see. This could come around after pregnancy. What are you seeing there, Brandy?
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, being pregnant does take a big toll. It's an amazing toll, and it's a toll that most moms would say, after they give birth, they would do it all over again. It was worth it, but it does take a toll. And you do see incidences where women are being diagnosed with autoimmune diseases post pregnancy. Again, that was definitely the case for me. I didn't have anything after my twins, my boys, but I was diagnosed with celiac after having my daughter. I actually suspect that I probably had Hashimoto's at the time as well, but it was not caught because of issues like blood sugar imbalances, issues with breastfeeding. I also had not a traumatic birth, but I did have an emergency C-section, which led to some, minor complications. And so in a sense, there was a little bit of trauma there. And, when you're already caring for young kids already, and you're having your next child, all of those things combined together, being nutrient deficient, not taking care of yourself, being sleep deprived, can lead you up to the path of, symptoms becoming a diagnosed disease. Now, the disease itself is not the problem. It's, again, lifestyle. There's things that you can do to manage it and rectify it, but it is something that is common and that we do see in many women.
Yeah, and pushing towards, medicated cycles and IUIs and IVFs when there's an underlying autoimmune disease, just, that just doesn't make sense to me.
For sure. And especially if you did have symptoms postpartum, like some women, they think that they're normal, which in some sense they are. But if you had a postpartum period where you had something beyond the baby blues, I mean, everybody's going to experience it, and you might be told, oh, don't worry about it. It's just the baby blues. It's not a big deal. But, there are some cases where you feel like you have them for longer, where you do have some postpartum depression or anxiety or shifts in hormones. Those are some pretty big clues that it might not be a good idea right now to try to get pregnant really quickly. Allow your body to fully heal. And each person is different. It can take a lot of time for your hormones to get back to balance postpartum. I had the hormones that I looked menopausal on my hormone 2 years after having my daughter. And it wasn't until I started working on my gut and anxiety and the food sensitivities, knowing that I had celiac and supporting my hormones, were they able to get back into balance. And I easily, unexpectedly, got pregnant with my fourth child. But that was 3.5 years afterwards. And there was a lot of healing that took place. So just be honest with yourself. Don't push yourself too hard. And it's worth it to take the time to really take care of yourself and make sure that you're feeling your best before trying to become pregnant again.
Yeah, especially with that secondary infertility. If you are being told that, like Brandy's saying, like men in the menopausal range, and we see this all the time, being told it's POI or it's DOR, it's your post-pregnancy. And even though, so for you, so how long did you say it took? 3 years?
It was 3.5 years after I had my daughter, I got pregnant, but I was working on my health, I would say, for at least a year. I was supporting my hormones, working on the gut, calm the anxiety down. And then my cycles improved. Not that they were off drastically. I will say I'm lucky in that respect, but they were off. My hormones were quite low. And I worked on it for a year, and then I became pregnant. So it can take a while, and you need to be patient. And, thinking about the fact that there are some women who have come to us and they're 1 year postpartum and they're trying to get pregnant. It's not happening right away. And the doctor's like, okay, infertility treatments. Well, maybe you just haven't given your body time to recover. That's, especially if you did have issues postpartum and you felt overwhelmed or sad or angry or anxious. All of those things are pretty big clues that you need some time to rest and recover and regenerate and feel better.
Yeah. And it's hard, like when you're being told that this is some hard news to receive, and then thinking that your only option is that, when it's meanwhile it's to kind of dig in to see what are those, if you did have a tough postpartum period, being able to, what are the healing opportunities that have been missed. And also, so are some environmental triggers. So like emotional stress. Obviously, after having a child, there is emotional stress with caring for a newborn. And yeah, if you're dealing with the baby blues, as they call them, but is it, if you've had, depression or anxiety, or maybe you're feeling overwhelmed? I know for me, it was definitely an overwhelmed feeling. I'm like, oh, it's just so much stuff to do. And then also there could be physical stressors, like if there's sleep deprivation, or like Brandy was talking about, the postpartum nutrient deficiencies. Can you go into the postpartum nutrient deficiencies a little bit for us?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, think about it. You are growing a baby. They are relying on you to nourish them so that they can grow and thrive. There are many instances where women have commented and say, oh, my teeth health were just horrible. Oh, yeah. After pregnancy, like my teeth were falling apart, or I was getting cavities. And it's because the baby was taking what it needed from you at your expense. And it takes time to replenish those minerals: calcium, magnesium, potassium, B vitamins. I mean, these are all things that take time. You can't just pop a pill and replenish them really quickly. It does take time. And so if you are nutrient depleted, you are setting yourself up for more nutrient depletion down the road, especially if you have something like a leaky gut or food sensitivities, or maybe you have some gut bugs. Maybe you're not sleeping. I mean, if you had a child that didn't sleep through the night until they were 9, 10, 11 months old, you're going to be deficient because you're not getting the sleep that you need. And that's going to take a toll on this body, and it's going to wear you down. So you're going to have even less nutrients available for your baby, and they will survive. They will take what they need. But then that means postpartum for you, you're even more depleted than where you started with. and then you have a bigger mountain to climb. And that's where I'm passionate about it. That was my experience. My recovery after my daughter was much different than my recovery after my son, my fourth baby. We were in an extremely stressful situation after him, extremely stressful, but my C-section postpartum recovery was much faster than it was with my daughter because I had taken that time to do some of the healing. I knew I had celiac disease. I had been working on the food sensitivities and working on anxiety, and it made a very big difference.
Yeah. So it is, a minimum of 3 months. So basically our program is 6 months, and then, it may be a year, but in the grand scheme of things, looking at your health, the health of your children and that epigenetic line, it's a very small window. But having said that, we understand, that panic sets in when we feel that there's, will it work? It's that uncertainty, which, then to get support with that, because as you move forward, being able to, give voice to that and to know that sometimes that some of those voices actually are not, it's not your voice that's in your head. It's someone else's. Perhaps maybe it's the well-meaning doctor that are telling you you're running out of time, or society that you're too old, all these things that start to embed in us and then kind of take us off track. And then we feel that we need to panic. And, it's a personal decision. If you wanted to do an IVF, and you've got to figure out when the time is right for you. And we'd set a plan saying, I'll try functional approach for 6 months and then go here. But to me, without looking at this part, there's no negative side effects of you working on your health. It's just for you and your partner. It's not just you, the two of you together.
I was just saying, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's no judgment. It's just we're sharing what we've learned. And I'm honestly sharing what I wish people had told me.
Yep. And so with the secondary infertility, as I said, we have a whole podcast on this that would have released before this. But some of the themes we see: chronic stress, people, as I say, going back to work very early and dealing with, young child and juggling all of this, autoimmune disease, what we were talking about, ovulation disorders. A lot of people don't, not even sure when they are cycling being, but we did an episode on fertility charting. So ovulation disorders, people that struggle to have their first child, and then now the second one is not working. Thyroid dysfunction, which is a theme with basically all the couples we work with, like a high percentage of them, which then impacting your hormone production. We see common themes with secondary infertility, such as POI. So premature ovarian insufficiency, PCOS, there's low sperm count, and then complications in pregnancy if there's any C-section, or there could be scarring from that. So anything you wanted to add there, Brandy?
I mean, you covered everything well, and I think that podcast is going to be great. Justine, who works on the team as well, has that experience. I mean, she, struggled with infertility with her first baby, but did a lot of healing postpartum afterwards and did not have to do that the second time around. So I think her story is going to be a really good one to listen to when she shares that. And again, no judgment, but if you did have struggles with your first pregnancy and you had struggles postpartum, I would highly encourage you to consider, taking the time to really dig into what's going on with your health so that you can feel really good, and taking a little bit of extra time before you try to get pregnant again for the best success possible.
Mm-hmm. And so what we can do for preconception health. So obviously we talk about here doing that organic, non-GMO, nutrient dense diet. We see a lot of people that have been on long-term hormonal birth control, which can then predispose you to food sensitivities and gut infections, and then impact your body's ability to absorb that healthy, those healthy nutrients. So the hair tissue mineral analysis test really can dig into that. But it's interesting back to that vaginal birth stuff and the stats. So as we were saying, 32% of births in the US are with C-section. China, it's 51%. And then the C-section. So I had both my kids with C-sections. So they came into that sterile environment. They got the hospital microbiome. And then what happens with that? They become prone to ear infections, upper respiratory infections. Then, like my children, they were put on antibiotics. And then typically, and this is actually from Dr. Zach Bush, and I really encourage you to look him up. He is so freaking smart. He is a physician specializing in internal medicine, endocrinology, and hospice care. So he is really into regenerative farming. And he's just when you hear him speak, you're just like a call to arms. You got to just go. So talking about So basically the ear infections, the upper respiratory with the antibiotics. And then what happens? Then strep throat. Both my kids had strep throat and, again, put on all kinds of antibiotics. I had strep throat like multiple times when they were young as well. And that's typically from age 5 to 13, the ear infections, the strep throat, the upper respiratory. I remember my daughter she must have had for like 3 years a green nose. I remember the school being like, what are you doing with this? And I'm like, she had a sinus infection for years and years, this little thing with his little nose coming out. And then when they get into the teen years, then it's like premature puberty. My kids didn't have that, but infertility, which we won't know for years, weight gain, which is very common, diabetes that is hitting kids at an alarming rate, depression, anxiety. So my son has mood issues, sleep disorders. His sleep is just ridiculous, like very disrupted. So working on all that stuff now and, making changes with them with having both of them gluten and dairy free and doing that, it's been about 10 years since we've done that. So definitely that's been a challenge. So, and then continuing to look at this differently from the conventional side of things. I remember my daughter for like years when she was little, like wetting the bed. Well, she had a dairy intolerance and we took that out and she didn't have that issue anymore. So, that was just my experience with the C-section, and it is being able to have, is conventional medicine pushing us faster towards a C-section because there's like a fear factor that something's going to go wrong, and to have a midwife and a doula to support you for a healthy vaginal delivery. Now, it can't be the case all the time that sometimes you have to have a C-section, but then with that, there's the vaginal swabbing where you get that large cotton swab and you put that, the microbiome for the vagina on the ears, nose, mouth, rectum of the child. And then they're not getting that sterile hospital setting, microbiome. So I knew none of this, obviously, when I had my kids. But yeah, look up Dr. Zach Bush. He definitely has a lot of information on that. Anything you wanted to add on that, Brandy?
Yeah. I mean, this is a tough issue and women can become very anxiety prone when they're pregnant, worrying about that. There are situations where you just can't help it. It's just, it happens. And so being aware of how that can affect your baby is important. And then knowing what you can do afterwards without having guilt, I think is important, because whether or not the people that you work with are willing to do that swab afterwards, if you have a C-section, they may not. I did not have a doctor that was willing to do that. However, this is where, you could step in, and breastfeeding is going to be super duper important if you can do it. I completely understand those women that cannot. I struggled very much. I tried everything, and I'm pretty sure it was my thyroid and Hashimoto's, but I did the best I could. I even if it's just the tiniest amount of breast milk, and then you supplement with a bottle, buy the best quality formula that you can, get a probiotic for them so that they're getting those probiotics. As my kids grow older, I taught them to, we taught them actually to love things like sauerkraut and kombucha and fermented things.
Yep.
And so our kids love those things now. So trying to get probiotics and things into them early. And then also, asking questions when you're taking them to the doctor and they have colds and flus and things like that. Sometimes with ear infections, it's not always bacterial. Sometimes it's viral, even with things like pink eye and things like that. They don't always need antibiotics. Having that conversation with your pediatrician and asking them, okay, like, does it absolutely have to be this, or can we try something else? And some doctors are willing to talk to you about that. And it may seem very scary to ask those questions, but it's important. All the knowledge I have, I'm still scared to ask the doctor questions sometimes because I don't want to question their authority or their judgment. We are the only ones that can advocate for our children. So if you are in that situation and you didn't have the choice, then, knowing the things that you can do postpartum is going to be really helpful. And the other thing I will say is if you are breastfeeding, being aware of what foods work for you and what don't is going to be important. So if you are intolerant to gluten or dairy or whatever food you're intolerant to, and you're eating it on a regular basis and you're baby is getting a breast milk, that may predispose them to some issues because your body is inflamed and on high alert, and your immune system might even be weakened from having those foods all the time. So just looking at your own health and doing what you can and what you have the control over, because you're not always going to have control over C-sections. I had my twins naturally and my other two C-section. I didn't have a choice. And my other two who had a C-section have the food sensitivities. Is it a chicken or the egg? I don't know. I just know that it was different for them. It could have been the nutrient deficiency that I didn't have with my twins because we prepared so much for the boys before we got pregnant the first time. We just don't know. But knowing what we do now is just really taking control of what you can control afterwards, not judging yourself for it, not beating yourself up because it wasn't perfect, and being gentle with yourself. I think that's another thing that's really important is the mental health piece of it, is stop beating yourself up for things that you can't control and just do the best you can.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's key. Like for me, I had both my kids with C-section. The first, my daughter was, I was awake for my son. They had to put me in a general anesthetic because when they're like, oh, we're doing the C-section. Do you feel that knife? Yes, I feel that knife. They're like, okay, put her under. I woke up. What did we have? So so I had that. And then I didn't work on any of my preconception health. So I don't know if it was the chicken or the eggs. I didn't do either. But yeah, no blame, no self-blame. It's kind of, this is being able to me, once I discovered the functional approach, I was able to help them now for, with health issues for all of us. It's like, oh, there's things you can do. And it's having that board of directors of people around you to be like, okay, wait, what do we need to look at here? And, just having open conversations with practitioners and asking for support is key. I do remember for my daughter when she was getting the tubes in her ears, and literally that ear, nose, and throat surgeon was doing like 10 kids that day. Like you'd go to her office and there just was kid after kid after kid. I was like, at the time I was like, oh wow, look at her. Now I'm like, if we're just by changing some food, we could prevent probably, I don't know what percentage of those surgeries, but probably a lot. I know for my daughter, if we had taken those foods out of her diet at an earlier age, she probably wouldn't have needed it. That's to me shocking as to what's going on. And, why don't we know this? And just really to empower ourselves. And this kind of finally here with some diet and lifestyle recommendations, supplements. What are you thinking there, Brandy?
Well, nutrient density is the key, honestly. Especially preconception, making sure that you're getting a wide array of nutrients, things that are going to help with pregnancy, like choline-rich foods, like eggs, egg yolks. Those are amazing. If you can tolerate dairy, many people can't, but if you can, full-fat dairy has some pretty good things that are helpful in pregnancy and growth of the baby. Making sure that you are aware of your food sensitivities. There are going to be times in pregnancy, especially in that first trimester, where you're not going to want to eat anything but like toast and butter or crackers and whatever. You know what? If it's not perfect, it's fine. Just when you are able to eat more comfortably and not have aversions to foods, nutrient dense foods, things that have a lot of good nutrition in it as much as possible, that's going to be helpful. And I would say the same is true postpartum. Regardless of whether you have a vaginal birth or a C-section birth, you are going to need a lot of nutrient density to recover and to produce a good amount of breast milk. Lots of fluids, lots of good quality fats and foods. This is not a time for you to be going on a diet to lose that baby weight. You need calories and good nutrients to produce milk and to recover. Work with a practitioner if you're not sure. Make sure, if you aren't getting a good wide array of things in your diet, maybe a multivitamin is a good thing for you to get the things that you're missing. Some things that can be helpful. Magnesium can be really helpful beforehand and during pregnancy. Of course, talk with your doctor, your healthcare practitioner, but that can help with things like nausea and morning sickness. And it definitely can help later in pregnancy when you start having those aches and pains, and it can help you with your mood postpartum as well. A good quality omega-3 supplement I think is also important for brain development with baby, but also to keep you strong and healthy and recovery postpartum. We could do a whole show on things like collagen and bone broth and good quality foods. It's not a time to be going on a drastic diet.
I just had my bone broth. I was going to post something on social media because when I stirred it up, it actually looked like a cappuccino because it kind of foamed on top because I was using the powder kind, but so yummy. Yeah. And the food sensitivity piece, if you know that you're like, when you eat a food, you're like, oh, I feel bloated or it makes me feel funny. Well, don't eat that food. Like that would be like, we see a theme with people with non-celiac gluten sensitivity. So for them, gluten is not recommended. And that's the same thing when you're pregnant. You don't want to have it. So if you know there's an issue, I wouldn't eat the food. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I mean, I experienced both. I didn't know anything about my food sensitivities for 2 of my pregnancies. And, I mean, I was aware of nutrient density. I had a lot of smoothies because you can pack a lot of things into a smoothie. And I always had fish oil. I actually always had hemp hearts, surprisingly. I'd learned about hemp hearts. I had those in both pregnancies quite a bit for some good protein and calcium and omega-3s. And then with my son, my last pregnancy, I had celiac, so I knew that. And I think that did make a big difference with postpartum recovery. I did not have any gluten. And in fact, I was glutened once while I was pregnant and it was a scary experience. So yeah. it wasn't worth it, to me. And again, just when you can eat, just eat the foods that satisfy you, but nutrients. And if that means you're having smoothies every day because you can pack a bunch of stuff in there, then have a smoothie. It's going to go a long way. It's not the time to just go hog wild and say, I know that I am sensitive to gluten, but I'm going to eat a whole bunch of it anyways. Mm-hmm. I definitely wouldn't recommend that. It can be hard. I lived off soda crackers on the first 2 pregnancies, and with my third, I couldn't because I knew I had celiac, but there are alternatives to having soda crackers. So you can always find an alternative and just do the best you can.
Mary's crackers. And what's your final thoughts on this topic, Brandy?
So again, I think it's just, for me, it's important. And it's also important to ask for help. If you feel like something is not right, especially postpartum, please ask for help. And if you get the runaround, keep asking. I went to 8 different doctors before I found one that was I could convince to run the celiac test on. Every other one just told me, oh no, you're fine. You're just tired because you have 3 kids. No, I wasn't. Keep asking. Don't believe that everything is normal if you don't feel normal. Keep asking for help. Keep looking for answers. Advocate for yourself, and just do the best you can.
Absolutely. I love that. Thank you. Well, thanks for coming on. And yeah, this topic is really, I just don't think a lot of people there's enough conversation around it. So I wanted to have some things for you to think about. And, as you're on the journey to have your child, to know that, there's things you can do. And also it is, as we were talking about, if there's guilt and self-blame and all this other stuff, to be really gentle with yourself. This is not about you beating yourself up. And, as you discover this information, then it's like, that's the time to take action. But it's like you didn't know it before. And so now you do. And it's really being able to be empowered is really why we do this, do these talks. Great. Well, thank you.
Thank you.
So as far as our FabFertile method, that includes functional testing, like we're talking about. So food sensitivity testing, stool testing, hormone testing using the Dutch test, hair tissue mineral analysis testing, and then blood chemistry review. So not to diagnose, but to educate and really seeing what are the healing opportunities that have been missed. And then also including the foundational pieces of this. So looking at the diet that's right for you, looking at sleep for months, movement, not over exercising or under exercising, stress. And so it's really important, although the program does include the testing to give us that targeted approach to figure out, why it's not working, getting to the underlying reason. The foundational piece is equally as important: diet, sleep, movement, stress, because you can't out supplement the basics. And I've got people, yelling through the Zoom call at me going, give me the supplements. What do I need to do? And it's important to work on the basics. And so addressing the whole part of the program, the FabFertile method, is to be able to address the stressors, such as the diet piece. So the food that's right for you, addressing those gut infections, parasites, worms, bacterial infections being passed back and forth to each other, environmental toxins like we were talking about today on the podcast. So reducing your exposure to making sure filtered water and organic produce and your personal care is non-toxic. So really reducing that toxic burden, mental, emotional stress. Obviously the infertility diagnosis by itself can for some and for many be extremely stressful, liken it to a cancer diagnosis. So getting support around the mental, emotional side of that. as well as our busy, stressful lives. The mental emotional side is key. And then a structural stressor, if you have a pinched nerve or something out of alignment, digging into. And then the method also includes their partner. So we were just coaching single women in the beginning and really found we're missing the missing link was the partner. And it's to do this together. It's healthy mom and dad, healthy pregnancy, healthy baby, and then the healthy postpartum period, and including your partner to make those changes. So to looking at the blood chemistry review, doing the elimination diet together, cooking together, and really preparing this in the absolute best way for your baby. So if you are seriously considering taking a functional approach with your fertility, all you need to do is go to FabFertile, F-A-B Fertile, click on book a free call. And this call is for you and your partner. You can also go to the show notes and click on the link to book your free call. So thanks so much for listening, and until next time. Melatonin is important for female fertility. It helps regulate hormones and maintain the body's circadian rhythms. Plus, it helps determine the frequency and duration of the menstrual cycle. Plus, it impacts sperm count and motility. Blue and green light negatively impact our melatonin production. That's why we recommend Blue Blocks, blue and green light sleep glasses to all our one-to-one clients. Simply go to Blue Blocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast at checkout to receive your 15% discount. That's Blue Blocks, BLUBLOX.com, and use the coupon code GetPregnantPodcast. Hey there, I regularly speak with 5 to 10 couples per week who are struggling to have their baby. And although we want to help everyone, we only have 2 spots available per month to work with us. So the Supercharge Your Fertility Discovery call is for action takers, and really people who are ready to move forward so they can finally have their baby. And if you're not ready and you wait, the risk is you'll need to wait 2 to 3 months for a spot to open up. So if you're seriously considering working with us, go to FabFertile, FABFertile.com, and click on book a free call. Then you'll be all booked in and ready to spend 30 minutes to give you the action plan to getting pregnant naturally. That's FabFertile, FABFertile.com, and click on book a free call. I'm excited to offer you a special gift. If you are a U.S. resident, text Fertile, Fertile, to 55444. You'll be prompted to enter your email address and you'll receive our fertility yoga download. In this 20-minute intro video, we focus on a calming and peaceful practice to connect back to our heart. These simple yoga poses can help quiet negative thoughts and make you feel more in control. Download it now and get started today. For U.S. residents, text Fertile, Fertile, to 55444. For non-U.S. residents, go to Yoga Freebie, FREEBIE, to access your special gift. That's yogafreebie.com to access the free fertility yoga download. The Get Pregnant Naturally podcast, including show notes and links, provides information with respect to healthy living, nutrition, lab testing, and is intended for informational purposes only. The information provided is not a substitute for medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment, nor is it to be construed as such. We cannot guarantee that the information provided on the Get Pregnant Naturally podcast reflects the most up-to-date medical research. Information is provided without representation or warranties of any kind. Please consult a qualified physician for medical advice and always seek the advice of a qualified healthcare provider with any questions you may have regarding your health and nutrition program.